Good day and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. So, in this episode, I wanted to discuss something that was becoming a fairly significant concern in this conflict, and we have seen it in other conflicts as well. And this is obviously pertaining to the ongoing civil war taking place inside of the former state of Ethiopia. So, as the fighting has been raging for the better part of a year now, a significant amount of prisoners of war have been taken, mainly by the Tigrayan Defense Forces, taking into its possession prisoners of war of the former state of Ethiopia, and we are seeing right now, presently, so much surrendering within the confines of the federal forces, the Amhara regional militias, that it is now becoming difficult for the Tigrayan Defense Forces to maintain the amount of prisoners that it is now taking. So, if we go back to the 1991 Gulf War, when U.S. and coalition forces liberated Kuwait from Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The United States military, Army, Marines, and coalition forces to some extent took massive amounts of Iraqi prisoners of war. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands. So many, in fact, we really weren't sure what to do with them all, and quite frankly, there were times where we were basically sending them north because the capacity to take so many prisoners of war was very difficult. And unfortunately, for the current conflict inside of the former state of Ethiopia, we're now seeing that rear its ugly head in the form of just the sheer amount of prisoners the Tigrayan Defense Forces are now acquiring as this conflict continues. And we have seen time and time again through all aspects of the conflict, from the eviction of the forces of the Abiy loyalists from the Tigray region, from those federal forces being removed from the Tigray region, to the seizure of Kobo, Sakota, Lalibela, Weldia, and Mersa, and now possibly the doorsteps of Dese. We continue to see large-scale surrendering of some very poorly trained, poorly equipped, very low motivated forces of the Abiy loyalist federal forces. And obviously, when you have the amount of personnel that are surrendering, you are required to render them medical aid. You are required to render them food, shelter from elements within what would be defined as reason, and that is now really starting to take effect on the Tigray region. Obviously, you have a region in which the federal forces are employing its anaconda strategy to try and starve out the Tigray region, a tactic used by the federal forces during the American Civil War, in fact, in the early stages of it, and continued through that Civil War. And it was fairly effective. And again, here within the confines of this conflict, the federal forces have instituted a blockade, as have the despotic regime in Eritrea as well. So you have a region, the Tigray region, which is now taking in a surplus population of surrendering opponents of the opposing force, and it itself has the issue of feeding its own people to a certain extent. And now the Tigray region obviously is now required to facilitate the feeding of all these prisoners of war. And as I had spoke about in another video, we could be seeing in excess of 20,000 Ethiopian federal forces, Amhara regional militias, prisoners of war located at various facilities inside of the Tigray region, mainly within the area of Mekelle and its environments. But again, we continue to see, even near Dessie, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of federal forces of the B loyalists continue to surrender. During those post-surrender videos, you can clearly see many of them are very young. Some of them would appear to be 13, 14, 15 years old. Very distraught, very disorganized, and obviously not very well trained, and just put into the conflict. And those personnel obviously are now POWs of the Tigrayan Defense Forces. But it continues, and it is obviously having an effect on both sides of the equation, probably more so in terms of having to provide support for these forces, for these surrendered forces, is the Tigray region. It would seem that the Abiy loyalists, the federal forces, are not really having an issue conscripting large elements of its population and continuing to muster them into the conflict. And it's a vicious cycle. They undergo rudimentary training and are then sent to the front, where they are either KIA'd, wounded, or taken prisoner in large groups. And we continue to see this day in and day out. Really, almost every other day, we are receiving reports of fairly significant elements of the Ethiopian federal forces being taken prisoner as prisoners of war in this conflict. And it continues within the vicinity of Dessie. You can clearly see that these are new videos, that the terrain is much more lush and indicative of the terrain that is around Dessie, that is around Kombolcha. It is much greener, and you can clearly see that these, in fact, are wearing the federal uniform of the Ethiopian army, and they are marching north, many times without shoes, and there is a reason behind that. Won't address right now, but it is a significant issue right now, even for the Tigrayan Defense Forces, on what to do with all these prisoners of war that are being taken prisoner. Some have been paroled and sent south, and but for the most part, many of these are still being transported and moved into prisoner of war camps located in the Tigray region. But we will continue to monitor the situation and report again the sheer amount of prisoners of war that are being taken is really insane at this point. And one would have to ask, how long can this federal force, this federal army of the Abiy loyalists, continue to operate while taking the kind of losses that it is taking? And now, granted, we are starting to see, or we have been seeing, the much more higher use of Amhara regional militias, which obviously in many cases are not wearing uniforms, in many cases are not armed, and are being deployed to the front line to try and stem the tide of north of Dessie and Kombolcha. But we will continue to monitor the situation and report. It is a significant issue that I felt that was worthy of making a video, and we will soon have more content. Have a great day, everybody.